Hello. Today, as most of us look forward to Christmas, we're going to look back at Christmases long gone. Modern Christmases reflect the age we live in, with imitation Christmas trees, frozen turkeys and factory-made mince pies. But what was Christmas like in the early part of the century, before everything became a gift-wrapped convenience? With me are Edna Brannon, Florence Edwards and Emily Holde. Emily, you had Christmas when you were very young on the moors, didn't you, in Dartmouth? What do you remember mostly about those Christmases?
Well, they were really quite country Christmases because we lived on the outskirts of Exeter, and although there were a few shops, they were very small, but we could get the horse tram in those days into Exeter and go into the shops if we were buying presents. But most of our groceries and the butchery and the food for Christmas was sent. A man would come on Christmas Eve with a horse and cart and bring most of the things that we needed for Christmas. But what I remember most is that we made everything. We used to have to make all our own decorations and our own entertainment. There was no television in those days, and we had to do everything for ourselves.
When did you first start making your Christmas?
Oh, when we were quite young. I only had one brother. There were two of us in my family, and when I was only about 6 or 7 years old, I suppose, we used to get up an entertainment on Christmas, and when the relations came, there would be this wonderful show which we made between ourselves.
But your mother, in fact, would be the person who sort of made the Christmas, like all mothers. What time of year would she start thinking about Christmas?
Oh, well, Christmas began with us on Stir Up Sunday. You see, in the Church of England Book of Common Prayer, on the Sunday before Advent, there's a prayer which begins, "Stir up, we beseech thee," and Mother used to set quite a religious significance to that and say, now, next Sunday is Stir Up Sunday, we must get the puddings going. And that would be the signal for Christmas to begin.
What about you, Florence? You were giggling there. Did you remember Stir Up Sunday?
No, because our puddings were always made sort of in the week. Sunday was always a day of the chapel, and we used to go to chapel, you see, practically all day Sunday, and I don't know, we never thought anything of it. We used to like it.
Did your mother make all her Christmas cakes and puddings?
She made everything, mincemeat, mince pies, everything, and yet they were, you know, we were never well off. We never had pocket money or anything like that. But Mother started sometime before, I can't really honestly say when, but when it was most convenient to her. And then the turkey, of course, didn't come home till Christmas Eve. Father used to go to Smithfield and get that, walk to Smithfield, and you can get them cheaper at the very end of the day, you see, and he used to go to the end of the day and get the turkey and bring it home. And we generally used to get an H-bone and beef, but I don't think they even know what it means these days.
Yes. Edna, you came from the North Country. You lived in Yorkshire when you were a little girl. When did your mother start thinking about Christmas, first of all?
Well, end of August, that was the time she used to start. And at first, my dad used to start first, getting a few chickens. And then he had a shed in the backyard, and he used to feed his own cockerels. What bits we left on our plates, well, so it used to feed the chickens first for Christmas. Yeah. And Mother used to start at the end of September to beginning of October, making the puddings and making cake. Anybody come to the door and ask her to make a cake, she'd be making it. But it always used to be Sunday afternoon, after she took her last Yorkshire puddings out of the oven. In goes a Christmas cake. And nobody dare open that back door, you know, when she got that cake in the oven. No, you got to come through the front door, I'll stop out.
So it was quite a sort of
on a Sunday afternoon, yes. That used to be she used to have her Christmas cakes and, well, any cake, anybody come for a birthday cake or a wedding cake, anything like that. Used to always be at Sunday afternoon after she'd finished for a Sunday dinner.
Now, what about the actual Christmas food? I mean, nowadays we have chicken is commonplace. We have turkeys at all times of the year, if you can afford it. Was there such a thing as a special Christmassy food in those days?
Well, there was, because a chicken was really a luxury for us then. We didn't used to have chicken. You'd go and get a chicken any time of year now, but you didn't used to do in them times, you know. It was really a look, and a turkey. Well, you never saw a turkey. We didn't.
Florence,
Yes.
did your father keep chickens at all?
Yes, he did, and that was in London. And we had them in the backyard, and I was born in Marylebone Road here, and we had rabbits kept in the back garden, and they were kept properly cleaned, and we had to look after them. But when we went to Battersea, he had chickens in the garden there.
But what about, this is it, but what about, now when I go and buy a chicken, let's face it, it's all tied up, it's got no head on, and its
not the
legs
same
are all
taste.
beautifully
It's
tied
not.
in string. Who prepared
It's not.
yours?
If you buy a chicken at the shops now, and you go feed one yourself, you don't get the same with that chicken you buy as you do feed yourself, you know.
No.
But didn't you feel really rather sad having kept those sort of cockerels and chickens all those months, having to sort of kill them?
Well, when there's a family of 14 of you, you haven't got a chance to think about that.
And who used to
Only thing you were thinking about is having a good Christmas dinner.
And who used to do the killing, Edna?
Dad used to kill them.
My father.
Dad always killed them.
Yes.
And we used to have a big, what we called a tub, wash tub. And we used to be one or two of us over at wash tub picking these chickens for Dad to trust up.
So you were all involved in the actual preparation of the
For
food,
Christmas,
really?
yes.
Now, what about, Emily, I'll ask you this, because you said you did everything for Christmas. What about the actual sort of decoration of the house, making the house look pretty? On the table here we've got some artificial decorations. Were there such things as those many
No,
years
of
ago?
course not. Those are probably plastic. Well, there are a few fir cones there, which we used to collect as children, and we used those as decoration on the Christmas tree usually, because there were no artificial Christmas trees in those days. We had to have a real tree. It was a real fir tree in a tub of sand. And no, there were no lights on it, except that we could buy, I remember when I was a little bit older, we were able to buy little tin clips which clipped onto the branches, and you could put little candles in them, like they have on birthday cakes today, those tiny candles. But my father was very frightened of fire, and he would never let us light them, so it was just to see them on the tree. But of course there was no electric light or anything like that. But the decorations I remember, we had of course holly and mistletoe, real holly and mistletoe, which we were allowed to put on the top of the pictures and places like that. But our only decorations across the room when I was very young, and I'm speaking now of 1902 or 3, were paper chains which we made ourselves. We used to sit at the table with these strips of paper and a basin of flour paste and an old pastry brush, pasting the end of these little strips and then linking them together. Yards and yards we made of those. And when we put them up, it was fairyland to our eyes. Children today would probably not think much of it, but to us it was absolutely Aladdin's cave. It was wonderful to us to see these decorations. And the tree, of course, all the decorations on the tree we made ourselves, because my brother was an artist as he was older, and we were both very fond of making things. And we made little stars and painted them with our paints and hang them on the tree. One thing we used to make, we used to get the walnuts and open them very carefully without breaking the shells. And Mother used to give us a threepenny bit or sixpenny bit to put inside, and then we'd stick them together again and paint them with gold paint. Mother usually had some gold for touching up the picture frames, and we used to paint them with gold paint and hang those on the tree. But really all the decorations on the tree we made ourselves, even the little fairy at the top.
That reminds me,
Yes.
actually, of a tradition I'd forgotten about. I remember when we had Christmas pudding on Christmas morning, we used to, on Christmas Day, we used to have silver threepenny bits.
Bits
Ah,
inside,
that's right.
Yes.
Do you remember
Yes,
that, Edna?
yes,
Yes,
rather.
yes.
When were the threepenny bits put in the pudding? I never ever found that
When
out.
it was made.
When it was made.
When it was made.
No good
When
putting
it
them
was
in
served
after.
Served up.
I see, so you put them in there.
Yeah, there used to be about 4 in for about 12 others.
And so then that's right. And
If you got one, you'd share it with the
Yes,
others, you know. You'd
yes.
share it out with them after, change it and share it with them.
And they were well
Yeah.
scrubbed.
Oh, yes.
And if you were
put in-
extra fussy, you
they were
wrapped them in a tiny
sterilised,
bit
you
of
know.
tissue paper and put them in, but
But
they
no,
were
Mother-
really well scrubbed.
Mother would never. She'd put
We
a little
never
bit
did.
of lard and
No.
rub a bit of lard on
Bit of
them
lard or something there.
and drop them in.
Talking about food again, actually, something else occurs to me. I mean, I've got now a refrigerator and a deep freeze, and everything sort of stays in there and keeps well. How did you keep your food fresh in those days?
Well, it wasn't. The cockerel and that was killed the day before.
But that would be Christmas Eve, surely.
Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve morning they was killed and they were cleaned and ready for oven next day. But we had pantries with big stone slabs, and everything used to be put on there like a fridge, and never saw no fridges in them days, and still the food used to keep.
What about you, Florence? Did you
Well, our kitchen was in the basement, and there was the stairs up to the front door, and there was a cellar that went right under those stairs, and it was like an ice house.
Yes.
Everything that had to be kept was kept in there, and it kept as good as any refrigerator. Yes.
What about presents then on Christmas morning as children? Nowadays there are marvellous, sophisticated toys for children.
Yes.
Looking back into your childhood, do you remember any particular present? Florence, do you remember any particular present?
On two different occasions. I never had a doll in my life. I was always keen on to have one, but the only one I ever got was Mother sitting up till 2 o'clock in the morning finishing a rag doll that she'd made. Bought the outline of it and stuffed and dressed. And then another time I wanted a skipping rope. I'd wanted it for such a long time. And to my great surprise and pleasure, there was one in my stocking at Christmas time. It was a skipping rope. I didn't want anything else. And my main idea of Christmas in those days, from the whole way through, the first thing I think of is they were happy. Happy times. We were, as I say, we weren't well off by any means, but we made our pleasure. We had our games. We had Ludo and Snakes and Ladders and Hunt the Thimble, and we did charades.
Did your parents play with you as children?
Never too busy to play with us. They weren't. The only time that Mother was horrified was she came in with a mask on once to think it would make fun, and we were all so frightened. She said never again, and she never did put that on again.
Emily, you were probably better off as a child. I mean, you weren't very poor or anything. So did you have really marvellous presents on Christmas morning?
No. I only had one present as a rule, and my brother had one. I can remember because when I was very small, once I had a lovely doll's pram. That was very nice. And I think my brother had a stable with a little cart and a horse, which was a nice present. And one Christmas, he had a magic lantern, which was great excitement because we were able to, on Christmas Day, put up a sheet and show these marvellous slides. And there was one slide we liked particularly of a little girl skipping, and my father used to show it usually because you had to have an oil lamp in this magic lantern, which was rather dangerous for children in those days, considered to be. And my father used to just make the slide jump up and down, which was a terrible thrill. We were awfully excited at that. Of course, there was nothing in the way of cinemas or anything. We'd not seen moving pictures. It was something quite different. But it was usually, my present was usually a book when I got older. When I was about 10 or 11, it was a book or a paint box or a drawing book or something like that. But we didn't have, because we never had tricycles and bicycles and things that the children had today, nothing like that. We did have a few. We had a box of games, I remember once, a compendium of games, things like that.
Edna, what about the Christmas stocking? I mean, what was put in a Christmas stocking at times like that? Because you were a large family, weren't you?
We used to have his own stocking. We used to wash it out and hang it up at foot at bed. We could always see my mother come in. And there used to be a new penny at bottom, and then a few mixed nuts, and a little orange and a little apple, and then probably a couple of little bars of chocolate. You could get 6 of them bars then, you know, for a penny. What you pay tuppence for now. And there'd probably be a couple of them lapped in a bit of fancy paper, and you probably then you find a little bit of those fancy sweets as they used to have now, sugar mice. I wrote like that, fastened in, you see, and put into it. Anything to fill your stocking up. But as for toys, we never had the toys. We never could afford it. She used to say, if you have it in your belly, you can't have it outside.
But Edna, it just did seem an awful big emphasis on food.
It was a worry for Mother for food because, I mean, you get well, 2 of them was married, two got married, oldest sister got married, then my brother got married. Well, it gradually come down. But you have 12 to feed at that table. And there was a table in we couldn't all sit in one room, you know. We had to have sitting room as well, what they call sitting room now, but we used to have it as one room, see, one lot in there and one small ones in there, in that room. That's how she used to fit it out.
But of course, sweets at that time must have to have them at Christmas must have been important to you. Because did you have sweets all the year round?
Oh no, my mother was one for fruit. She liked you to have plenty of fruit. But as for sweets, she didn't care for you having a lot of sweets. But she was never mean. She'd do anything. She'd wash. She used to take washing in. She'd make cakes. Anything, so long as she could feed us. Her main worry was feeding us.
Now, thinking about Christmas Day and then and Christmas Day now, it seems to me we have television. And television, I mean, already we all know about the great sparkling television shows that's going to be put on to Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and so on. Florence, what did you do on Christmas Day? How did you pass the time?
Christmas Day, mainly. First of all, we were, all of us children and Dad, was packed. Oh no, Dad was working. He was a postman, so of course he was always working Christmas Day. But the children, we all went off to chapel for a carol service, and that gave Mother a chance of getting on with the main cooking. And the turkey was put onto the roasting jack in front of the fire. I don't think they know much about those sort of things nowadays, but it was marvellous, and it used to swing round, and we'd come home and be watching it. And then afterwards, after dinner, Mother used to invite, because we had lodgers in the house to help to make ends meet, but they were invited to Christmas dinner free. They didn't have to pay for that, and she always had an old lady out of the workhouse for the day. She felt that was her good turn for a Christmas with them. So it never made, I mean, one more never made. Granny was there and friends perhaps, and we all sat round a great big table, and we had our food. Generally, we waited till Father came home. We'd get little bits perhaps before that, but we waited for Father to come home so that he shared with us. And then afterwards we had a rest for Mother and those who were washing up. Sometimes we had to help with the washing up, of course.
It was hard work, though, for women in those days, wasn't
it? Wasn't
Come
really.
on.
We didn't think of it as hard work.
No,
Well, I mean, Edna, look,
was.
I mean, you know, what time did your mother get up on Christmas
Yes,
morning?
but
6 o'clock.
she'd get up there, but there was all those girls, you see. There was 8 girls. And we'd all got a job of our own to do. Now one would get knives and forks and put them in the bowl with water for to wash up. Others would get the plates, pile them up, take them in the kitchen. One would wash, one would wipe, other one would put away. It were all done. We're now, they really don't know how to carry on with a big family, I tell you. They don't.
Well, what about the fun then? I mean, what was?
Well, we hadn't much time for fun, Mary, tell you the truth. We hadn't much time for fun because by the time dinner was over, it was time for Mother to start to get tea ready.
Well, what was entertaining? Well, let's move on a bit then now to when you're grown-ups, because I can imagine the excitement of preparation for you when you were little. But let's move on then a few years to when you were adults, because this would then be the Depression time, wouldn't it, when money was short. What difference did it make to you, Emily, as an adult during the war and the Depression period?
Well, our Christmases were very quiet after, you see, my brother was killed in the First War. And so in 1916, and so the years following that were very quiet Christmases indeed, because there was only my parents and myself, and my mother wasn't at all well. And so our Christmases were very quiet, really. We used to have our little Christmas fair, you know, but Mother still used to make puddings and mince pies. She believed that mince pie, my mother's idea of a mince pie was quite religious, religious significance. She believed that the mincemeat, or she used to think of the mincemeat as the presence of the wise men, and on the top of every mince pie there was a little rectangle of citron which represented the manger. And we went to church, of course, on Christmas Day when I was older and I'd been confirmed.
Do you think that in fact the religious significance has gone out of Christmas?
Not entirely. No, not entirely. It may do in some places, but I think if you really get to the rock bottom, it hasn't really entirely gone out. Even people that don't believe in a church or anything like that, there's something about Christmas, goodwill on earth, peace to all men, that comes into it to quite an extent, as otherwise, why would there be all these different charities helping? There must be something still left in there, and I really do believe that, and I think there always will be there, because I don't think we could have carried on when we were young, as we were, without that belief.
Did you find that, Edna? Because then you had children, didn't you?
Yes.
During the Depression. Now, where did you get your strength from as a person to carry on? Do you think?
Well, it is really marvellous where its strength does come from, isn't it? It's marvellous what you can go through.
But you did have good times, didn't you?
Oh, yes, we had good times. We always made it that way. We used to have our own Christmas Day at home.
Yeah.
And then Boxing Day, I used to have the family. And I still have one son and his 5 children at Boxing Day. But not like I used to have before, because it's only an old age bundle now, you see. And we used to all be together. And
Do you think that's what it was? It a community, much more families?
Yes.
Well, it
More
was.
family.
It is really more if you've got a family. But when your family gradually...
But how did you get the money, you see, Edna? Because, I mean, looking back, you came from a poor family, you yourself had children during the Depression, your husband was a miner. Where did you find those extra pennies to sort of eke out at Christmas and provide
Well,
Christmas?
you'd start and you put, same as the butchers, if you want to go to butchers or the groceries, you put, so 6pence or 9pence or a shilling on a card to get your groceries, a little bit extras for Christmas. Start one year and go right through to next Christmas, same as we do now.
Yeah.
I do now with my milkman.
These were
and
the Christmas
groceries.
clubs?
Yeah,
Yes.
the Christmas clubs. And I do now with Vies, that big shop Vies, you know.
What about you,
so much
Florence?
a week.
Yes, I used to do the same thing, because in the Depression, my husband was out of work, and we'd come to the Christmas and they'd lost his paper, so we got no money from the labour exchange. We had no Christmas in mind, and my mother said to me, "What are you doing for Christmas?" I said, "Oh, I don't know." I said, "We hadn't thought about it much." Well, she said, "Do me a favour." For the first time in their lives, they'd been invited out for Christmas. She said, "Come round and look after Eva, and you'll find plenty there." And of course, all the Christmas things were there. But without that, we would have gone round, without a doubt. But the thing was, that was a Christmas that I hadn't anything to look forward to, except that we were together and we did manage.
Yes. Well, Emily, what about Christmas today? What do you feel in comparison, looking back at your Christmases and the Christmases that the children have today?
Well, I think they have a great many presents. Sometimes, of course, I only speak of those children that I know, neighbours and so on. And some of the children that I meet seem to me to have really too many presents, and they seem to be really bored with them, because in many cases they're not presents that they can do very much with. They're a sort of robot man or something, and you press a button and it lights up, and then you've had it. That's all there is to it. There's nothing much that you can do with them. Our presents very often, as I say, were a paint box or something that we could use and get fun out of afterwards. But I was going to say, during the First War, I was a ward maid, and several of my Christmases I can remember were in the nursing the wounded.
Really?
You see. Yes, in the VAD.
Yeah.
So that they were really lovely Christmases. We used to get most beautiful dinners for them, you see, the soldiers coming in from the
Are you
war.
looking forward to Christmas now?
Oh, yes.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for coming and telling us all about your old Christmases.
Thank you.
Florence, Edna and Emily, thank you so much, and a Merry Christmas to you all.